The God of angel armies. Standing beside me today. Not yesterday. Not in the Old Testament. Today, He stands beside us. And He is still the God of angel armies. 2 Timothy 2:3, Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier. Why is it we only believe certain parts of the Bible? Why is it we only put emphasis on certain aspects or certain things, certain words, certain terminologies, certain phrases, certain thought processes of the Bible? Why don't we put the same emphasis on every single word of the Bible? War, honor, battle, captain, camp, army, command, shield, adversary, guard, enemy, obey, wounded, valiant, armor, covert, helmet, weapons, sword, valor, liberty, soldier, encamped, footman, courage, siege, fortress, breach, centurion, armor-bearer, ambassador, invade, occupy, warrior, which is used 66 times in the Bible. And I can go on. The list continues. My point is, who do we really serve? I know we serve a God of love. But make no mistake, we serve a war of righteousness, a warrior king as well. Exodus 15:1 says, Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Isaiah 42:13. The Lord shall go forth as a mighty man. He shall stir up jealousy like a man of war. He shall cry, yea, roar. He shall prevail against his enemies. Joel 2:11. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army. For his camp is very great. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can abide it? Deuteronomy chapter 20 is listed as the law concerning warfare. In Psalm 144:1, Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. My goodness and my fortress, my high tower and my deliverer, my shield, he whom I trust, who subdueth my people under me. Lord, that is man, that thou takest knowledge of him, or the Son of Man, that thou markest account of him. My point in this is there's an underlying current, if you will, of the Old Testament. And we accept that fact, that we serve a warring God from the Old Testament. The New Testament says this. We have submission to authorities, or supposed to be in submission to authorities. Romans 13:1 says, Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there's no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. And Luke 22:52 says this, Then Jesus says unto the chief priests, captains of the temple, and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? My point is that the New Testament itself even alludes to certain things if you read it a little bit differently. we don't seem to dwell on words. We just kind of read through, and according to our sensibilities, our own personal sensibilities and human sensibilities, we understand it how we seem to understand it. If you really truly want to understand God, we need to become more like God, more understanding of who God is, not just who we are in Him. That one statement there, the underlying current, although it's about Jesus and about the priest that came out at him and he says, "Am I nothing more than a thief to you?" I understand that. But it's also stating that they are righteous to use a sword or a stave against thieves. You have to be able to see those things within the Word. And of course, Revelations, there's no question about Revelations. Revelation 19:11 says, "I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war." And I can go on with that, but we had a lesson not long ago on Revelations, and I think everybody here understands it. So my point in this is we serve a God who was righteous and holy and a warrior king in the Old Testament, in Revelations, but He is currently as well. He hasn't changed. He's still the same great I am that He was. Old Testament, New Testament, now, and Revelations to come. So my point is that God is not really, you can't call Him a pacifist. He's not. He is an ultimate military leader, and He led by example when He took the form of human and came to earth to exhibit the ultimate love for us. He came to earth and accepted mankind's violence and malice to death even. He conquered death, rose victoriously to fulfill His own requirement for justice. That's a military leader I can get behind. That's somebody I could follow into war. I have no trouble reconciling this God of love with a righteous warrior king, one and the same. We need to accept that He is the great I am, and He's not a one-faceted God made by man. He is Adonai, our sovereign Lord. The New Testament theme is love, but it's demonstrated in the midst of violence. So, I wanted to be able to get across to you all that who He really is. I understand, we accept Him, and we say He is. But do we believe and understand, and do we accept that He's more than just the God of love? He is a God of righteousness. So, if that is who He is, then maybe we need to accept who we truly are. We're a child of God. We're a friend of Jesus. We're called the saints of God. We are the light of the world, a citizen of heaven, a servant, a steward, and all those are great things and fall into the same thought process that we currently accept of Jesus as love, ultimate love. But we're also a soldier. He claims that. 2 Timothy 2:3. Now therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. That's who we are. As His valiant warrior, which the term man is used several times in the Bible, we've been given our marching orders. There are approximately 1,050 commands for the New Testament Christian. Some of them are repetitious, so they categorize down to about 850 total commands. I'm not sure I know all of them, let alone follow all of them. I do have just a couple that I'd like to go over for the purpose this morning, though. Some of the ones that stand out and are the easiest for us to accept: love God with all your heart, all thy soul, and all thy mind. That means all of God, not just the parts that your human sensibilities or emotions agree with. This passage means that our heart and our soul and our mind should actually come into compliance and agreeance with God. And then also, likewise, love thy neighbors as thyself. The Great Commission, Matthew 28:19, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. There's also some that are less known. Let's say Psalms 82:3, defend the poor and the fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver the poor and needy, rid them out of the hand of the wicked. We accept that. But do we truly understand it? Do we understand it as a soldier? Do we understand it as a soldier and who we're serving? A warrior king. A physical application or occurrence may have to happen to defend the defenseless or stop evil. It's not something we like to think about, but it may include certain violence, not with malice, but violence. Understand that an accident, car crash, can be a violent thing. There's no malice. Bearing in mind that a true soldier's objective is always, first and foremost, peacekeeping. But we are living in violent times and in a violent world. So here goes that speed bump I was telling you about. I think back to 9/11, and there was unbelievable violence. And there were people in the towers that could not defend themselves. They couldn't. There was nothing they could do. Yet Flight 93, there were warriors on board there. They took it upon themselves that they weren't going to allow themselves to be used for further violence. And they knew that their targets were defenseless. It starts to take on a new meaning, doesn't it, when you start to think about things like that? More recently, how about a Texas church? One man, a Christian in the church, in his family, decided violence was right. And he defended all those parishioners that were defenseless in that situation. I don't begrudge him that whatsoever. I have no problem reconciling God of love with a God that provides justice. I hope that none of us has to bear that burden, but a soldier will if need be, and he's paid a price, I'll guarantee you. There's a weight that he'll carry for the rest of his life. Now, I've said all this because I want to understand if we're going to believe the Bible, we need to believe the whole Bible. If we're going to understand God, then we need to accept all of God. If we're truly going to be effective as God's emissary, then we need to know we're not just a servant, but a soldier as well. There's a lot of teaching that's been on for quite some time around that teaches just the one aspect of God, love, and He is the ultimate love. I have no doubt. But we've got to accept that He's not pacifist either. Our human sensibilities and our human emotions are what usually drive our thought process and usually how we learn. He also tells us that our emotions will lie to us. So the Bible was written by a warrior king. We're called to be valiant soldiers. So maybe we ought to change our thought process when we read the Bible a little bit. Maybe we need to read it from a different aspect. Take a few minutes and read it with a military mind. I guarantee you some things will jump out at you and change your viewpoint a little bit. And maybe we'll just understand how we're not serving Him the way we should. Maybe it'll bring out other things that we should be doing. Let's look at one verse just to get us going and make my point, and it won't take too long. Pastor promised me I wouldn't keep you past 2 o'clock, so. Luke 19:12 says this, "He said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, Occupy till I come." Now, most of us understand, will accept the fact that occupy means to continually trade or living life. But let's read what the dictionary's actual description of occupy is. Number 1, to take or fill up space. I'm sorry, but I know a lot of Christians are just filling up space in the pews. 2, to engage or employ the mind, energy, or attention of. Number 3, to be a resident or tenant of, to dwell in. Number 4, to hold position or office. Here's the one I wanted to draw attention to. Number 5, seize possession of and control, as by military invasion or conquest. A military term. I don't think anybody's here old enough to actually have been a part of the occupation of Japan in 1945, but a lot of us do remember. When MacArthur led the occupation of Japan, it changed everything Japan was about. Maybe occupy isn't a passive noun, but an active one. They built new infrastructure, education system, a new economic system, a new government, social changes, and a whole new way of life in Japan. Occupy. It adds kind of a new weight to occupy until Christ returns, doesn't it? A soldier isn't drafted into the military just to sit in the barracks and play cards. They have duties, responsibilities, training, and warring against the enemy. Are we actively going about our duties for our King? You know, knights used to battle over which one of them got to serve the king's desires. I don't see any of us fighting each other to serve the Lord. Matter of fact, it takes an act of Congress anymore to get people to be active in church and do God's will. There are lots of ways to actively battle evil. Are you defending the defenseless today as an active member of a pro-life organization? Are you assisting in battling in human trafficking somehow? There's plenty of places to serve. How about rebuilding our education system with godly standards? Somebody needs to take a look at the curriculum of 8th grade students here in this county. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. It's not good. What about the fight against opioids and other drugs? What about homelessness? Rebuilding our education system with godly standards, I already said. What about our social morality, local and on social media? Let's be honest. Most of us are just trying to live life, get everything we want, be at peace, enjoy our time here on this earth. That's not what a soldier is called to do. He's not called to sit in the barracks and play cards. We should be honoring God by sacrificing our life for His desires. After all, well, He didn't really sacrifice anything for us, did He? Maybe it's time we start thinking about things a little bit different and get back in the battle. I'm going to close with a story. Becky? I'm going to close with a story, and then we're going to give the invitation. David was a man after God's own heart. Imagine being able to say, you are a man after God's own heart. He fought with Goliath. He was a soldier. He was a warrior in his own right. He was a great king. And he had God's favor. What an honor. But unfortunately, this valiant warrior started leaning towards his own desires instead of those of the king. Lounging around on the rooftop, started to covet his neighbor's wife. Sent her husband to the front to be killed. And then he paid a terrible price. You all know the story. I'm not going to get into the details. If you want to read it, it's over in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. It's worth rereading to get your bearings. But the thing about it is, when he repented and went back to what he was called to do, be a soldier, went back to the battle, God elevated him back to his status. I think we have let a lot of our status go with God. Maybe we need to get back in the battle. Maybe it's time for us to dust off the armor and get it out of the closet. So the invitation is this. If you just lost that battle attitude, that soldier attitude, maybe we need to repent and get back in the battle. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done in this world. A lot. If you don't know who Christ really is, find out for yourself. Come on up here. I'll be glad to talk to you. We'll discuss it at length. Take my time. Let's visit. I'd love to explain to you who he really is. He's so much more than we realize.